Leave of Absence by Ludwig Bemelmans. Everybody can have a leave of absence in the American army if he asks for it. Some men don't ask and just go away, which in wartime is desertion. In any other army is punishable by death. Here it is different. If he is gone, they wait. If he will not come back himself within the short while of a few weeks, if he comes back himself, little happens to him. At the most, a few days in the guardhouse, or he has docked his pay or demoted, if he has any rank. After 6 more weeks, he is officially absent without leave. Then, when he comes back himself, he still is not severely punished, but he is court-martialed and goes to the guardhouse for several weeks, only after a very long while. Only for a long while. Sorry, let me do that again. Only after a long while, I think it is 6 months, does he become an official deserter. And they start looking for him. We are given frequent leaves of absence because of the nature of the hospital. I have saved up my allowance to be able to go to New York. Why I want to go there I don't know, except that since I landed there and lived in that city first, I have been thinking of it as my home in America. And I think it is the idea of going home that everybody else speaks of so much that I feel I need. Besides, I get transportation if I take a patient along, and I have also some money. We are well paid and cannot spend any money, at least not much, because we are always invited. There are very few soldiers in Buffalo, and many patriotic ladies who need them for their entertainments. The house in which I lived in New York belongs to a lovely old lady, German, with a daughter who is very young and pretty. Her name is Ada Bach. The house is away from New York, near the Botanical Gardens and a park. It is reached with the subway and a streetcar. It is old and roomy and peculiar. It was the mansion in an estate. Trees stand around it, and in front is a lawn out of which stick a few rocks. There is a hill to the right, no other houses around, and a vegetable garden in back. I lived here chiefly because I could take my dog for runs in the country and because it was quiet. Ada sometimes writes to me. I have been thinking much of that house and my room and of Ada, and lately I have thought and pictured how I will try and see if I can make love to her. The nightly talk of the soldiers in their beds made me of the opinion that the way Mulvey and the kitchen gang do it is the best way, that is, without much ceremony, a few words and gestures, but complete indifference and confidence, as if it were accomplished before one starts. I know the formula by heart. It is simple and does not ask for much effort or imagination. It either works or one knows soon that it doesn't. After I delivered my patient in New York, I took the subway home, and near the park I had to change to the streetcar. This streetcar passes a riding academy, and I got off to hire a horse to start things right. It is a short ride, and Ada was home, and I managed to ride in and be very much admired. I tied the horse to a tree, and we had dinner. Mrs. Bach had cooked something very fine. Ada had on a lovely dress and kissed me, and so far it was very successful. Only during dinner Mrs. Bach asked whether I rode the horse all the way from Buffalo. Afterward I had to take the horse back, and it was soon evening. Many relatives came, and nothing happened except that I thought everything would be all right, by my first of all being very certain of success. There was one difficulty. Mrs. Bach and Ada sleep in the same bed in the same room, so I had to think of something different. The next morning is Saturday, and Ada asks me to go to the city with her. We ride in the subway arm in arm, and everybody smiles stupidly at us. We ride very far downtown. She wants me to see the office and her boss. This man is a lawyer by the name of Mirror, and he says we must come to dinner at his house that evening. In the office I am introduced to another girl and a young man. Ada sits down at the typewriter and writes, and smiles at me to show how well she can write without looking at the machine, and also chews gum at the same time. The other girl is allowed to see all this, and I get a chair. Ada can go early, and Mr. Mirror calls up his house and tells his wife that we, Ada and I, are coming with him to dinner that evening. The house in which he lives is on East 193rd Street. It is called Oxford Hall. Towards the street, it has a very imposing facade. Around it, 2 feet away from the building on the sidewalk, and sunk into thick concrete posts or swollen brass pipes. A court opens into the building from the street. In its center is a cement fountain, and left and right of the doors are two cement lions. In an outer hall are rows and rows of names, and the one we look for is written out, Stanley B. Muir, Counselor at Law. The upper part of the foyer is decorated as if someone had smeared an unthinkable material with his 5 fingers on the wall. Up to the chest of it is white marble. In the middle stands a gold-painted elevator shaft. A boy in uniform with Oxford Hall written on him is inside when the elevator comes down. He takes us up, and there is a long corridor. All the way up in all these corridors I see baby carriages. There are 4 on this, the top floor. I would like to run away because I am certain I don't like this, but it is too late. At the door is a card, again with Stanley B. Muir, Counselor at Law, written on it. The door opens and we step into a long, narrow hall, at the end of which is the dining room. The furniture in this room is of a period called Mission. It is so big and the room so very little that we all sit glued to the table. Mr. Muir is a little man. The table is high, the sideboard is close beside him, and the grapefruit on the table is almost in his nose. His face has no more identity than the grapefruit. It is decorated with thickly rimmed glasses and a small mustache. But that only makes it more like all such faces that I have seen everywhere in New York. They are good people, and it is unkind to not be grateful and polite to them. But I feel a strong repulsion in me against all this. The house, the furniture, Mr. Muir, and I would like to get up and tell them that I do not like it and go away, but this, of course, is impossible. Mrs. Muir also has glasses, thin ones with a little chain. She is a woman who is not a mother, not a girl, not a mistress or wifey type. She is ordinary, unlovely, and only female in an unhappy sense. Her flesh is white, bloated, and porous. She must be hidden in the bath. Her voice is metallic and too big for the room, and her hands are common. The conversation is mostly of Mr. Muir's making. He had an argument with the superintendent of the building in the morning, and while he eats, he tells how he told that man to see that there was enough hot water or some such business. Also about a radiator. He insists on being heard. He says over and over again, listen to me, at any time when everybody's attention is not his. If that doesn't help, he takes hold of his wife's arm or my sleeve and pulls. He starts every sentence like this 3 times mostly. Then I said to him, Then I said to him, listen to me. Then I said to him, you know what I told him? At one time I turned around to look out of the window, which was behind my chair. Outside was a suicidal picture. Millions of bricks run this way and that, up and down, and they become narrow lines far below. They ended on a metal roof with skylight. Rows of windows were along the shaft. When I looked back in the room, he still went on. He always gives me an argument, that guy. For the rest of the conversation, here is, as if it were written on building blocks that are thrown from one person to another. Nothing is ever said. Ada seems to be at home here. She can join in and say the things to which they answer easily, and in which they are versed and secure. Sitting next to me, she eats with one hand. So must I, because she has my hand in hers, except when she cuts a piece of chicken. Whenever anything comes to the table, she says, "Oh, it's so delicious." She says, in saying this, she pauses at the letter L, leaving her tongue against her upper teeth for a moment too long. It sounds delicious. She does the same with beautiful. And to the ice cream she said, "Oh, I think it's the most delicious thing I ever put in my mouth." But that is not all. They wish to come tomorrow and visit Mrs. Bach's house. Ada says they will be delighted, and I can't very well say otherwise. Mr. Muir will bring his camera and take pictures of us, and afterwards we will go to the Botanical Gardens, and after that to a movie on 168th Street. Ada says once more that evening was so delicious. We leave the house, and I am glad of the fresh air after we get out of the golden elevator. We took a taxi. It was not far from home, and since I no longer wanted it, I could have my way on this first evening. Just to try out their value, I used one of Mulvey's phrases and gestures. She seemed to know it, followed in words and motion, and seemed willing to comply. But all desire was gone. The typewriter, which she can work without looking at Oxford Hall, and Mrs. Mirror have done it. Now there is a relaxed dumbness in her face. She is a sweet-smelling animal, without will. The lower lip hangs loose. The line of her neck is clumsy. The ankles are too thick, but my dislike fastens itself chiefly on the delicious. I try to think of Mulvey's terrible girls. They are so much worse than Ada, but that is better. They are at least strong, and I also say to myself, why be so very choosing after all? It is not a pleasure of the mind, but it is. And that is the end of Leave of Absence.